Hello, welcome to the sewing room. I'm Lara, and today I want to talk to you about a couple of things. First of all, one of my very favorite new dresses is this one. I've been wearing it a lot since I made it. I want to talk to you about that, but I also want to kind of talk about something I want to try, and we'll see. Basically we'll see if anybody seems to like it, in which case I will keep doing it. I do want to talk about this dress and how I made it and why I like wearing it so much. But today I also want to try something a little bit different for the channel. In the past, Lisa and I have done quite a lot of work around bringing our ancestress Polly back into the picture by basically depicting time periods in her life through clothing. It's been a fantastic project. I've really loved it. We're going to keep doing it, so I hope you like it too. But today I want to do something a little bit different where I am planning on continuing to make clothing from different time periods in history. This is a 1974 pattern, or rather a replica of a 1974 pattern. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I want to take the opportunity to make clothes that I wear every day, that I really do wear in my everyday wardrobe. When I make clothes, my primary goal for my everyday clothes is that they're going to be clothes I really want to wear every day, often. That means a couple of different things that I've realized over the years. It needs to be comfortable. Because I work from home at a desk job, it needs to be comfortable when I'm sitting down. It needs to be, in the winter, it needs to be warm. In the summer, it needs to be cool. And it also, if it has to be ironed before it's worn, I'm not going to wear it as often. So that's not really an everyday garment for me if it has to be ironed. So those are a little bit on the wayside. With all that said, one thing I do still love vintage style clothing. You can see right behind me, that's a 1960s dress I'm working on right now. But I do want to play with what happens if, when I make something from a certain year, what if I kind of cast my mind's eye back or do research about that time period and talk about a person in that time period who inspires me. Now, the 70s is pretty rich time period for me personally. My own mother was extremely active in that time period. But sorry, Mom, this video is not about you. I maybe do one day exploring a little bit of your life. But today I want to talk about Wilma Mankiller. If you're around my age, you came of age at a time when she was a little bit more visible because she was actually the chief of the Cherokee Nation. Most people who I say Wilma Mankiller to get kind of freaked out because they hear Mankiller and they think, good Lord. But I do want to dispel that a little bit and say among the Cherokee people, that last name is obviously very honored now because of her, but it basically just was kind of it was like a level of command or respect among people who were in the military. So it's a little bit like lieutenant or colonel. It's just a title. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's someone who ran around killing people. Yikes. First off, about the dress. I do really love this. This is the very easy, very Vogue 2000 pattern that was released in 2024 as a 50-year anniversary of the dress. And it says it's easy. I think those of us who sew know that if it's Vogue, it's not really going to be easy. I would say it's easy for a Vogue pattern. But you know, that's one of those things, take it with a grain of salt. It's not actually going to be super simple dress. On the other hand, I do think the pattern is very well drafted. All the pieces went together really well for me. I didn't really have any problems. One of the biggest issues that I had was I did kind of tweak the pattern instructions a little bit in that they had on the dress you have facings and you have interfacing. And the instructions were going to have you apply fusible interfacing to the body of the garment instead of to the facing. And that just didn't sit right with me, so I didn't do that. Other changes I made, let me grab my notes. Oh, I did shorten the skirt by 2.5 inches because I am short. I did not do a sleeve facing. So the original instructions were you have this cuff like this, and then there's also would be a facing to the cuff. And I thought, at least with this fabric, that just felt like too many steps, too much stuff going on. So instead I applied the cuff and then turned back those seam allowances. Let me make sure that's in focus. Come on, there we go. Turn back those seam allowances and then top stitched. So that's top stitched down. And I think I also, there is quite a fair bit of top stitching in this pattern. I did do top stitching on the collar. Well, you'll notice I didn't do any top stitching along these front facings. And basically it's because this is a cotton rayon, this is a cotton spandex blend knit fabric. And I found when I tried to do top stitching along an edge, if both pieces of that fabric weren't interfaced. So here I've got my facing that is interfaced, and I've got my outer edge that is not interfaced. And if I tried to stitch over that with a top stitch, even with a walking foot, even with the right needle, even with adjusting the pressure on my presser foot, it would ripple. I couldn't get it to lay right. So I did do a little, I kind of thought that might happen. It behaved fairly well, the top stitching behaved fairly well on areas like the collars and the cuffs, where I actually did interface both layers. So both layers of the collar I interfaced, and both layers of the cuffs I interfaced. I also used a fusible weft interfacing on both the collar and the cuffs because those don't need to stretch. But the areas that need to have a little bit of stretch and fluidity, like the interfacing for the facing around this line here, I used a really nice 4-way stretch interfacing. I've said it before, I'll say it again, your interfacing is not really an area that you can skip. Some people feel since you can't really see it, you know, maybe you could choose a less expensive option. I'm not saying more expensive is always better, but you really don't save yourself any trouble if you choose a less expensive interfacing, especially fusible interfacing, because ultimately you're going to end up with a product you don't like as much, and then you won't wear it as much, and so then you get less value out of the thing that you spent so much time and effort on. So there's my little spiel about fusible interfacing. Always invest in your interfacing, and once you find one you like, keep buying it, because it's very valuable to have high quality fusible interfacings that you trust and that are going to look good. I love this fabric. I found it really easy to work with, and I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I think it goes with this design so well. When I saw this in the fabric store, I was like, that has to be a 70s style wrap dress. And personally, I am coming from a time period in my life where I wore a lot of black and very, very little patterns. So I'm always really excited when I find a pattern that's bright and cheerful, but also still feels like me. So if that makes any sense to you, I see you, and yeah, buy the bright print if it's something you like. So in order to get enough room for my bicep, I did cut the dress one size, and then I cut the sleeves one size bigger, and that worked great. I do that a lot with multi-size patterns, but I did find once I had done that the lower sleeve seemed too baggy, so I ended up taking in that seam about 1.5 inches actually at the cuff to help it, you know, all go together. So then I had to narrow the cuff as well so that it would sew in properly. So those are some changes I made. The pattern was made so that the collar and the undercollar were exactly the same size. And I think that can be kind of hard to sew, and it's going to end up not looking as good. So what I actually did for that is I trimmed 1/4 inch off of the outer edge of the undercollar piece before I started sewing everything together. Again, how much you trim is going to depend on the thickness of the fabric and the way that you're having it lay. but that's what worked for me with this pattern. Yeah, this fabric doesn't like top stitching on the bodice. That's a note I have here. So what I did is, instead of top stitching here, this is actually understitched. And I wonder if you can see that. I think you can see that. So basically, instead of having top stitching, I have a little understitching there, just to help hold everything in place. Oh, one more little note. I am wearing this dress with a slip. It isn't because I think the neckline is too low. It's because I'm in Minnesota and it's really cold. So the extra layer, helps keep me warm. And because I always zoom around on these videos looking for when the person talking about the pattern actually walks around and moves in it. I don't know, I have a thing where I guess I just really like seeing how clothes actually look on people, in at least as a slight similarity to regular life, so that's why I want to show this. It does have a nice flow, not super twirly skirt, but very, very comfortable and, in my opinion, really cute. I actually keep stopping and starting this recording because I am so nervous about presenting Wilma Mankiller accurately, and in a positive way, because I honestly can't overstate the impact it had on me as a young girl, seeing her in the public eye and seeing her leading the Cherokee people, my people, and seeing her as such a powerful force for good and kindness and taking care of people. And I want more people to know about her, because she's not the kind of person you're going to see everywhere all the time. It was exciting for everyone this year when Barbie actually came out with a Wilma Mankiller Barbie. That was so cool. But yeah, I want to be a part, if I can contribute in even a small way to helping more people know who she was, then that will be a good thing for me. So this wonderful book, if you want to know a lot more, is Mankiller, A Chief and Her People, an autobiography by the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation. And it is an autobiography, but she also had a co-author, a guy named Michael Wallis. So really, really solid if you really want to know a lot more about her. I want to kind of talk about principal chief. The Cherokee people do use the term principal chief for our leaders, our elected leaders. But we also sometimes just call them principals or principal leaders. Sometimes the term chief just has a little too much baggage, frankly. So we sometimes choose not to use that term, but principal chief is technically the correct term. And yes, you can actually see here, again, I'm not trying to portray Wilma in any way. But she has a tendency, at least in the photos I've seen of her, to wear either a tear dress or kind of what I would consider modernized for the 1980s version of a shirt dress. And this could be a shirt plus skirt combo, hard to tell because she's sitting down. But if I were trying to actually portray her, I would be wearing shoulder pads. So 1974, when this dress was first launched by Diane von Furstenberg, and I believe it's when the pattern is from too. They didn't say specifically on the pattern that it was 1974, it's just 70s. But I do think I did hear it was put out as part of the 50th anniversary of this dress. So let's assume that really means 1974. In 1974, Wilma Mankiller was probably not wearing this dress. That was the year she actually divorced her first husband, and then moved back to, 2 years later, she moved back to Oklahoma. And she divorced him, she says in the book, because he wanted a traditional housewife. And she had a stronger desire to do things in the community than at her home. backing up a little bit on her personal history, she was born in 1945 in Oklahoma, but then her family in the 50s was part of the program, what did they call it here? Yeah, so in the 1950s, the US federal government had a relocation program where they took people basically directly off of reservations or small communities of Native Americans. And I've only heard direct stories about people from Oklahoma and South Dakota, but I'm sure it happened lots of places. But they basically took them and just put them in urban areas, mostly in California. So, for instance, her people went from living in a house with no running water to, here's what she says. One day I was living in a rural Cherokee community, and a few days later I was living in California and trying to deal with the mysteries of television, neon lights, and elevators. It was a total culture shock. I'm sure it was, even for a relatively young person as she was then. And this is so interesting. So in 1969, there was the occupation of Alcatraz Island by university students in San Francisco Bay, and she actually calls that out as the thing that radicalized her, as the thing that made her think, okay, like I need to change. This is how she became an activist. Okay, reading the quote. In most ways, I was a typical housewife at that time, recalls Wilma. But when Alcatraz occurred, I became aware of what needed to be done to let the rest of the world know that Indians had rights too. Alcatraz articulated my own feelings about being an Indian. It was a benchmark. After that, I became involved. I just love that. So she started going to school. And in 1974, she divorced her husband. And then in 1979, after moving back to Oklahoma with her two daughters, yes. After almost 3 years of helping to procure important grants and launch critical rural services for the tribe, Mankiller enrolled in graduate courses at the nearby University of Arkansas. And, I mean, okay, I can't encapsulate this amazing woman's life in a short YouTube video, but I did want to basically introduce her to anybody who hasn't heard of her, and I think she's great. One of the things that I did love reading about her was that she loved wearing bright colors, and in Every Day is a Good Day, Reflections by Contemporary Indigenous Women. This is the memorial edition after she passed away in 2010. I believe the introduction is by Gloria Steinem. I'm just going to double check that. Oh, this is like riveting, right? Like watching me flip through a book. Oops. Yes, haha. Introduction by Gloria Steinem. I read this book, I think I read this book probably around I think it was 2016. And, you know, I very valuable book. I very important. But one of the things that I loved about it was hearing that pink was Wilma's favorite color. So again, this dress is not portraying her, but I am in a few little teeny tiny ways trying to honor her, and speak her name and bring her memory for you. So just to backtrack a bit and give you a little more context, when her family moved to San Francisco in 1956, that was part of a program that was put up by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which relocated thousands of Native Americans in the late 1950s. The program's goal, was to abolish Native people's ties to their lands and cultures. More than 1/3 of those who were relocated returned home, marking the program's failure. In 1968, Congress enacted the Indian Civil Rights Act, which extended the Bill of Rights to Native Americans for the first time. Okay, so just to be really clear about this, Native Americans did not technically have full civil rights in the United States of America until 1968, when my mother was 18 years old. This is not ancient history, folks. In 1971, the Cherokee elected their first principal chief since Oklahoma statehood, a man named W.W. Keeler. In 1973, AIM members took over Wounded Knee, South Dakota, beginning a 69-day siege. The group demanded a full U.S. Senate investigation on conditions on reservations. They also demanded the return of the Black Hills to the Lakota Nation. In 1976, the Cherokee ratified a new constitution, which is actually still up. I think that there have been some movements toward changing the constitution, but that has not moved forward at this moment of 2025. In 1985, Wilma Mankiller became the first woman principal chief of the Cherokees because the previous chief, a man named Ross Swimmer, resigned. So even though she got into office the first time because her predecessor resigned, she was reelected then twice. So she actually had 3 different terms of office. The last one in 1991, when she received 82% of the vote. So yeah, I was fortunate enough to come of age and become aware of anything going on politically at a time when this incredible, strong, smart, erudite, soulful woman was leading my people. So for that, I will always be eternally grateful. If you've been here before, welcome back. If it's your first time, welcome. Either way, thank you for stopping. If you're interested in this kind of thing, please like and subscribe. Please let me know in the comments what you think, and I'll do more of these. Thanks, bye-bye.